Hello, everybody. How's everybody doing on this new month of June? Welcome all of you guys who are joining us from all over the world. We just discussed. We have people coming from Australia and China, so I really appreciate the fact that you guys are joining us from probably 2 or 3 in the morning. We're going to try to be as quick as possible. Here in the introduction, I have to talk about a couple of things that we've been asked a lot of questions about who we are, what we do. And then we'll jump right in with the wonderful Jim Kalbach, who's going to talk to us about mapping experiences. So again, as always, thank you to our 2 wonderful sponsors, Slalom Consulting here in the US and Precocity, who's helping us bring those Zoom meetings together. They've been with us for a long time now, and we wouldn't be able to do what we do without them. So thank you so much to Slalom and Precocity. Yeah. Okay, so very quickly, today is Tuesday, June 2nd. So I am Greg Luffy, and of course we have Brandon, Christopher, and Brenda, who are all together forming the Service Design Network Dallas chapter, which has now grown to become more of a global platform since we have friends all over the world joining us. Very quickly, so I wanted to give a bit of a shout out to all of you. We now have 1,500 members, probably 1,600 by now, so this is wonderful. Considering we had basically 20 people 2 years ago. So thank you so much to all of you guys who are joining us for our events and now our virtual events, obviously, because of the world conditions. But thank you so much for all of you guys to join us every day, every week, every month. Thank you so much for that. Very quickly about Service Design Network, we are being asked all the time about exactly what do we do, how do we do this, and why do we do it. So we are a global organization that is based out of Germany originally, but we have many chapters all over the world. So I'm going to go very quickly to this so you have a better idea of who we are, what we do. And I will give you a website you can go to. You can see servicedesignetwork.org on the bottom. We have over 18,000 members all over the world, mostly professional, like corporate people and some students. As I said, we have 45 global chapters, maybe even more now. And you can see some of you are definitely coming from China, Russia, and Ukraine. We have chapters there as well. So I invite you to join your local chapters as well. This is the list of the actual chapters. So a bit of a sad news here is the Copenhagen in Denmark event in October was canceled, obviously. So this is the Service Design Network global event has been so wonderful, so useful to all of you guys to join once a year. There won't be one this year. We are working on maybe having a virtual event so we can still meet and talk about wonderful service design things. But obviously this year we're going to have to skip for safety reasons. So it's unfortunate, but we'll try to do more of these virtual events so you guys can still feel a sense of community and share content together. The Service Design Network offers a lot of resources. So those are kind of like the membership benefits. You can go and check that yourself. There is a student membership, I think it's $40 or 40 euros, that allows you to actually become a member, which is great because you actually have access to a lot of stuff, which I'm going to run very quickly. But definitely go and take a look at the membership and you can actually have access to all those resources. There are some books being published, some reports being published about some deep dive into some very particular, like public sector, health sector. There is a wonderful magazine. I think it's a quality magazine. So we actually will have the editor-in-chief, Jesse Grimes, is going to be here, I think, the end of June. So wonderful resource about service design. There is also a training program. You can actually become a service design accredited trainer, which is also wonderful to actually put on your resume. There is an academy that you can actually join, actually take some design classes. It's running out of Germany for now, but they have some virtual events as well. So again, a lot of really cool stuff you can actually be part of. Just look into the membership. It can be as cheap as 40 euros or dollars a year for students. And most of the company take care of that for you. So if you want to join as a professional, a lot of companies kind of expense that for you. So just definitely reach out to your managers or your directors and they can take care of that for you. Of course, now here we have a new resource. So all the, like today is going to be recorded and available on YouTube probably tonight, tomorrow morning. So you can actually go back and see the videos we have done the past 4 events. And those are wonderful way for you to catch up. And I personally, I still have to go back and listen to the wonderful facilitation piece with Adam last week, which gave incredible tips, and I have to go back and take a look myself. Today's agenda, so we're going to just do a very quick run into the upcoming guests. We're going to talk about how you can be part of this. We have an open Q&A rules. We're going to jump to some very quick service design questions to Jim, and then we're going to talk about mapping experiences. And then we kind of have the open Q&A. So some of you who've been there before, you know how it works. I'm going to tell you how to do this, but definitely this is about you, and you can ask any question you want to Jim. I will kind of try to work that with you guys. We only have 1 hour, so we'll try to be as quick as possible, okay? So as we just discussed, we had Mark Stigdorn a couple of weeks ago. We had Adam last week. Today we have the wonderful Jim Kalbach who's going to talk about mapping experiences. On the 25th, we'll have Andy Pourlaine as well, who's going to talk about the business of service design. And so those are going to be the 3 key, we call it master of service design. Is it okay if I call you master of service design, Jim?
Sure, go right ahead.
Okay, I just did. We also have 3 more events coming up. Some of you were part of the education topic we had a few weeks ago, and we had so many questions. We decided to bring back Mark Fontaine from the Service Design Show out of Holland, and he's going to talk more about how to build a service design portfolio, which is difficult. And so please go back and talk to Mark on the 9th. We're gonna have a very different one, so we'll try to keep a threshold between the academic and philosophic, how service design, but also the success stories and what has been done. And we'll have the wonderful Christine Patterson from Alto, which is a ride-hailing startup here in Dallas, who's going to tell us about what they've gone through literally step by step and how they went through the COVID-19 issues here in Dallas and how they adapted and eventually use service design to come out stronger. So it's going to tell us exactly what happened, how they fix it, and how they actually just be able to react and use service design as a way to be a catalyst to where they are now. Very much transformed company over the past 2 months. Garcia, which has been a host before, will talk also about some retail success story about online pickup, online ordering, and in-store pickup. That's going to be on the 16th of June. And as I was mentioning, on the 30th, we'll have Jesse Grimes, who's going to talk more about service design and innovation and startups environment, which is very important to a lot of people we deal with. He's an expert in that innovation space. So if you care about startup innovation and how to actually use service design for that space, tune in with us on the 30th. How we're going to do this. So some of you have done this before, you know that there is a chat room in Zoom. What I'm going to ask you is to make it clear to our moderators, Brandon, Christopher, and Brenda. That's actually a question for Jim. There's usually a lot of chatter. You guys are very engaged, and there's a lot of questions, there's a lot of answers between yourselves, but sometimes it's kind of hard for them to pick up a true question to Jim. So please, if you have a question to the panel or to Jim, just write something like this, like question to Jim or question to panel or question something, so they can kind of spot it. So make it easier for them to kind of find those questions, because the chat is actually very busy. I appreciate that. And also do not wait the last 5 minutes to ask questions. So if you have a question right now, or in the next few minutes, or while Jim is talking, don't be shy. Just ask your question now, and we'll just gather them at the end. Or we're going to have 35 questions with 5 minutes to answer them. So this is Jim. So Jim Kalbach, do you want to give us a little bit of introduction about yourself, what you do, what you've been doing? So obviously Jim is the author of Mapping Experiences. So if you don't have it, you should. This is actually my clean version. I actually have another one that is not so clean. This is basically, I hate to go biblical here, but this is the Bible of mapping experiences. If you don't have this book, you should have it. If you have read it, please reread it. And it's a constant. So Jim and I have been kind of talking offline about actually just working on the second version of it. I hope I'm not having like big secrets or anything, but there is an updated version coming up with obviously new mapping ways and new mapping methodologies. And he also has another book, Jobs to be Done. We're not going to talk about this today, but tell us a bit about yourself, Jim.
Yeah, sure. So, hey, everybody, thanks for having me here today. It's great to see so many people online around the world. I thought I was going to be talking to a Texas crowd here, but I didn't know I was going to get Australia and China and stuff like that. So that's great. I'm the head of customer experience at Mural, leading online whiteboard. It has a lot to do with visualization and collaboration and mapping, actually, as well, too. But so I am writing the second edition. I actually haven't announced that yet, and so I'm glad you mentioned it, because I'm right at the point now where I'm telling everyone that I'm writing a second edition of that book. In fact, I just finished the manuscript, so this is a first. This is the first time I've actually said it in public that the second edition is coming out of mapping experiences. And then, I'm also the author of Jobs to be Done. My background, a lot of design and design strategy, worked for various companies in the past in various roles, from software design to more design strategy type of thing. Now in my current role, I actually head up a team of customer success managers and support. So it's a slightly different role for me, but still dealing with experience and service overall. In fact, we talk about the services that we offer and designing service packages and things like that as well too. So using a lot of the skills and sensibilities that I learned in writing these two books in a slightly different way now here at Mural. I live in Jersey City, New Jersey, right across from Manhattan. Like I said, glad to be here.
Good, very good. So exclusively here on the world stage, Jim is going to be coming with a new book. You've heard it first here.
Second edition, Mapping Experiences. This is the first time I've said that in public.
You handled it very well. Thank you so much, Jim.
Yeah, sure.
All right, so now let's get to know you. So I usually have a couple of high-level questions about your service design acumen, I would say, but it's mostly kind of like, what is your point of view on some very basic question? People really want to know what Jim thinks about some stuff, right? Okay. So I'm gonna ask you 3 top-level questions, and people have follow-up questions. Of course, just go on the chat room and ask for follow-up questions for later on today.
Sure.
Let's go. So what tool methodology do you think has the biggest impact on how design teams introduce journey maps into their service design projects?
Into their service design projects, right? I think a couple of things. If I look at the word methodology, the first thing that comes to my mind is Jobs to be Done. And I think, I got attracted to Jobs to be Done a long time ago. And coming from the design world, when you come across Jobs to be Done, you often say, wait, isn't that what we've been doing? And the answer is very often yes, that the overlap is really, really great, right? But I think for me, Jobs to be Done brings a couple of unique things to the table. So you don't have to throw away all your old thinking, learn something new. It's in fact 80% of it you already know, right? But I think there are some unique parts of jobs thinking, I call it. At a risk of introducing a new buzzword, I've actually started using the word jobs thinking because I don't want to talk about it like a process. It's not a process or a methodology. It's a way of seeing the world. And I think it's that way of seeing, it's that lens and the perspective that I think is really powerful around jobs. I'm going to talk a little bit about it later because I actually want to compare some different perspectives on mapping. It's something I don't think we talk about a lot, but there are different ways to view human beings, individuals, the people that we serve, and there's different lenses that you can see them through. And I want to talk about how we do that through maps, through examples of maps. But I think, for me, Jobs to be Done brings something new to the table, even if you triangulate it and combine it with things that you're already doing. The other thing that's really interesting for me from Jobs to be Done is that it comes from the business community as well too. It's not design thinking or task analysis or goal-directed design or contextual inquiry or service design that all have the word design in there and are kind of quote unquote owned by us, and then we invite other people into our world, right? Jobs to be Done is kind of open, so it's out there. It was developed by the business community. And the thing that I find exciting about it is that anybody in the organization can benefit from it. So I'm talking to customer success groups. I'm talking to marketing groups. I'm talking to sales teams about how they can apply Jobs to be Done and jobs thinking on their projects. And I think that's really powerful, right? To have this lingua franca in an organization where you can be talking about customers and needs and what they're trying to get done in a way that's not doesn't have ownership or words on them that are loaded, like the word design is a loaded term. So I know from my perspective, I think that Jobs to be Done has a lot to offer service design in general.
Cool, very good. And I'm guessing a good step would be to read that book, right? I'm guessing this is a nice plug for your book.
Yeah, okay. Go out, buy the book. Yeah, rosenfeldmedia.com, amazon.com. I don't like to promote myself, Greg, but thanks for doing that for me.
You're very welcome.
You're great. You're a great promoter here today. So.
All right, let's go next question.
Yeah, wait, I had another thing though, a whole nother thing. If you go back to that, so tool. I was thinking about this tool thing. My friend Eric Flowers. I don't know if you guys know Eric Flowers over at Practical Service Design. He developed this kind of pattern for service blueprinting. He calls it Practical Service Blueprint, right? And I'm going to feature that in the book a little bit. He contributed a little case study there as well too, and I'm quite excited about that framework and that method for lots of reasons. I think it's more flexible, it's more versatile. It to some degree it's even more practical than a quote unquote traditional service blueprint, to be honest with you. So if you don't know, I see a lot of people here nodding. I don't know if I can't see all 138 of us too, but I don't know if there's a link. I don't have a link right here, but if a link to that Practical Service Design Blueprint. And I don't know if that's contentious or not, if you guys don't like it or if you like it, but
it's a great tool.
Yeah. So I see the link of flying out there as well too. And the point there too is, I don't know. We're not done inventing and reinventing and evolving as well too. Like, how can you take that thing and make it better? Like that kind of thing. And I'm the kind of designer, like I never run the same project twice, and I've never used the same method exactly the same. I'm always I want to improve this, or the customer situation is different, or my situation is different. So I like to bring in lots of different techniques and tools and munge them up and extend and evolve them as well too. I think that's healthy for us as service designers, but I think it's also healthy for the practice as well too, because then you keep evolving out there too.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, next question. How do you build a design environment that fosters forward thinking and creativity?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think it kind of goes beyond tools and methods and even service design as a practice. I think then you got to start thinking about your team as a stakeholder, that's your collaboration partner, right? Because we very, very, very rarely do a project in isolation where it's just us making all the decisions, right? So you can do all the research and the blueprinting and the recommendations that come out of that, but how do you bring in other people into that conversation, or even better, how do you bring them in to the insights so that they come to the conclusions, right? So, I do, and I talk about this in the first edition of Mapping Experiences, and I'm going to hit this point a little bit harder in the second edition, that, just talking about mapping here, again, I'm just talking about the book, that you wear a map maker's hat. You're the map maker, right? You got to go out and do research. You got to visualize it. It's got to have the right storyline, validity, and all that kind of thing. But then you take your hat off and you have to become a facilitator, right? And I think facilitation is part of what we do. And I've always said it's not about the map, it's not the noun, it's the mapping, it's the process of mapping that I think you can use as a centripetal force to bring in people into the conversations. And not just at the end, it's throughout the whole process. So when you're setting up the map, the research, bring people around with you. Sometimes it's a great opportunity to get people out of the building, right? Do a workshop. Sometimes it's the first time the departments have been together. I can't tell you how many times I've done a mapping workshop and the marketing team and the engineering team and the sales team have never met before. The first time was in my workshop, right? So I think we have this great, center of gravity force that we need to own a little bit more in terms of being facilitators of conversations as well too.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about this last week with Anna, and we stressed a lot about facilitation, that it's very important to actually bring people together. And we've talked in the past also, service blueprint is not a deliverable, it's an activity, right?
Correct,
people kind of focus I bought this. No, you haven't bought this. You bought the process and the activity.
Agree. Yeah, it's not the noun, it's the verb. I mean, and that's exactly what I say. And, which is a good point too, because I've had some people approach me. I don't do much consulting now, but I've had people approach me and say, "Hey, we want you to create a map for us." And I will say, no, I will help you facilitate creating the map. But it doesn't make any sense for me to do the research and create a map and then go, what am I going to do? Send an email with a PDF attachment and say, here's your map? Like,
yeah.
What value is that to them? You know, they lose all the subject matter expertise, they lose all the insight, and they have to come to the conclusions, right? And it's our job to bring people to the conclusions based on what we see. Of course, we can give answers as well too. Hey, we saw this sucks or this is great. You know, we can provide that, but it's so much more powerful if people just come to that realization themselves outside of design fields. I mean, because they're often the ones that are making decisions anyway, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, I have, I think, one more question and we're gonna jump into it. Okay.
Sure.
What is the biggest challenge the service design field needs to tackle right now, in your opinion?
I think it's that what I just said, actually, which is the rest of the organization, right? And you see a lot of people from, you know, design fields with whatever it is, service design, UX, now moving into product management roles or management roles, or, you know, people starting to write about the organizational design of the company, because that's what they're running up against. So for instance, my friend Jeff Gotthelf wrote the book Lean UX, and very successful book, and went around the world teaching teams how to practice lean UX. But he realized he was running them up against a brick wall of their organization, that they were taking this great work that they did and kind of smashing it up against an immutable kind of static brick wall. So his next book was Sense and Respond, which is essentially a book about organizational design and business decision making, because that was the bigger concern. So it kind of plays in hand with my second answer there about facilitation. But this isn't just about facilitating. This is about it's about a culture change almost. And, you know, we need to also see ourselves as culture change agents, right? That you can't keep service design insights to ourselves, that we also have to expose people to that and show them the business value of that in an ongoing way, in an almost enablement kind of way, to change the way that organizations think. Is that part of our job? I think it has to be, actually, because otherwise we're just going to be pasting up service blueprints around the walls of the office like wallpaper.
Yeah, we discussed that with Mark Sigdon about service design cannot be a silo itself. Our goal is to break silos.
Agree.
You can't be a silo as well.
Agree. And if you look at organizations like IBM, you know, they have their enterprise design thinking program, which was homegrown. They spun up that capability all by themselves. That got top down from the CEO's support as a way to change the culture of IBM, because they looked around and they saw engineers programming applications for themselves. And they said, we have to change the way that we think. They didn't say we have to hire a designer for every design team, right? Because there are 400,000 people at IBM. You can't hire a designer in every design team. The only way to change that culture at that scale is to actually change the mindset of the people on the ground. And I work with IBM all the time in my job. And I bump into teams all over IBM. They're talking about personas. They're talking about as-is maps. You know, it's become part of their culture. I don't know if it's affected their business yet, but they've done a really good job at spreading the joy, the love, you know, of service-oriented thinking, design thinking, whatever you want to call it, throughout that whole organization. So we can be, you know, we can be a change agent, basically.
Good. Very good. So we're about halfway down. So how about you tell us more about mapping experiences, your experience, your expertise, and give us some tips about how do we move forward from there.
Yeah, sure.
So again, just quick reminder, if you have any question about what Jim just said, go ahead and put that into the chat room. And over the next 20 minutes, Jim is going to kind of like, freestyle these mapping experiences tips. And if you have any question or follow-up question, go ahead in the chat room and ask him specific questions. Yeah. And that's it. And I'm going to stop sharing so you can actually share your stuff.
And I'm going to ask a question while we're doing this, actually, and apologies to Jen Blatz and anybody else who heard me do this already. This is a topic. Sorry, I'm just adding something here. Really, I just got a quick question here to get started. Road. Okay, now I'm going to start sharing my screen. There we go. You guys seeing my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So you got the chicken. Why did the chicken cross the road?
Yes.
All right. So why did the chicken cross the road? Anybody know the answer other than Jen Blatz?
die alone in the rain, according to some author.
There you go. Yeah, it's a simple, innocent question, but I just wanted to talk around 3, maybe 4 different perspectives of mapping, and not focus necessarily on the technique, but I want to focus on the perspective that the point of view that the diagram takes. And I want us to just be aware of the fact that when we create a map of an experience or a service blueprint, that we're taking a certain perspective, that we're seeing the world through a certain lens. And I want to use it based on the example of why did the chicken cross the road? And the answer is to get to the other side, right? Which I found out is not something that, I think that's only American. I don't even know if they tell that joke in the UK, actually. But the first time I asked that question, I was in Germany, and they couldn't answer the question because people didn't realize it. In any event, here in the U.S., that's a joke that 4-year-olds or 5-year-olds ask themselves, and it's kind of a letdown. The joke is that it's a letdown, right? Why did chicken cross the road? To get to the other side, right? But I like to use this because I think it's also an example of a job to be done, and we can say the chicken's job is to get to the other side, right? There's aspirations and emotions around that, but in a functional level, chicken wants to cross the road, right? So I just want to use that example to show 3 different perspectives in mapping and talk about the differences, because I think they're super, super important. And I don't think we talk about this as much as we should. So the first perspective I want to show is a customer journey map. And I'm just going to assume everybody's heard of a customer journey map on this call. So as the name says, this is a customer journey map, and we're looking at the chicken as a customer. In this case, we have to imagine that we work for a company called the Acme Road Crosser. So just use your fantasy for a second. You work for the Acme Road Crosser, and it's an app that chickens can use to help them get to the other side safely and quickly. Okay. Then we can come up with a little persona. So we have a persona here, Chucky's chicken, right? Demographic, psychographic view of the chicken, right? So if we work for this company, I want to see, how does the chicken become a customer? How do they come and acquire my app, right? And then we have a discovery phase here where the chicken discovers us. They see the ad on Facebook or wherever chickens find apps, advertisements. They learn about the product, maybe compare it to another app, select it. Oh, I'm gonna subscribe to that one. Then they onboard. They figure out how to use it and watch a video maybe. Then they use it to cross the road. Somehow it helps them cross the road. And then we want them to give us a 10 on NPS. They recommend it to their friends, right? We can plot an emotional curve here. What is the chicken thinking? Hey, this looks easy. This is awesome. I'm going to tell all my friends about this app, right? So we got land and expand here, right? We're a SaaS. This is a SaaS-based app, right? So subscription model, pre-sales, post-sales, land and expand kind of thing. If you think about the perspective of a customer journey map, using this example, the story, what's the story? And that's the question I'm going to ask here is, what's the story? What's this about? What is the point of view here? And part of the answer is in the name customer journey map, is that we're seeing the chicken as a customer. We're explicitly saying the chicken is a customer, and this is my go-to-market story. This is actually not a story about the chicken. This is my story, right? As a company, our story, I should say, because we all work for the company here on this call. This is the road crossers story, right? It's how do they discover me? How do they learn about me? Why do they select me? There's almost nothing about the chicken in here, right? It's very biased and selfish. And it's the ego in here is astounding, and all the assumptions around the ego, like the chicken even needs your stupid app. Right? This map assumes that the chicken even needs my app and is a customer of me. So I'm seeing the individual, I'm looking at my market, and I'm seeing the individual as a consumer, and I'm telling the story of consumption, right? That's what a customer journey map. Now, don't get me wrong, customer journey maps are really important to have. You need this view. This is a perspective that any company should have, right? Because you want to open up the funnel, you want to keep loyalty there. There's all kinds of activities that go behind this that are super important for you as a business. I just want to be clear, this isn't about the chicken's job. There's nothing in here about crossing the road, right? We don't know anything about crossing the road. All we know is how the chicken got him our stupid app and acquired it, right? So let's go over to a service blueprint. So here's a service blueprint, right? I'm just use the kind of the traditional service blueprinting thing, right? So if you look at the actions here, same thing though. We have a persona. We have an app. We do have an app, right? So we're still working for the road crosser, but now we want to see how does the chicken use that app to cross the road, right? That's the service that we're providing, right? So, open up the app, you check for a signal on your mobile device, right? There's a GPS system involved there for that and backstage support. Chicken opens up, logs in, gets suggestions where to cross, then maybe get some time information on when to cross. This is a really good app, by the way. It's linked into Waze and Google Maps and GPS. It's an amazing app. Then the chicken starts crossing the road. You get an alert to traffic changes while you're crossing the road, and then the chicken reaches the other side, right? And I can look at front stage and backstage activities. Have a conversation, facilitate a conversation, right? We talked about facilitating conversations. What I can do is come in here with a team of marketing and engineers or whoever I need to assemble here to diagnose problems and then come up with solutions, right? So real work can come out of this. And I would argue, though, that this is a different perspective because I'm not looking at the app as a customer, as a buyer. How do they acquire my app? What we're looking at now is the context of use, right? And there is a little bit in here about how the chicken crosses the road, right? So, for instance, we get where to cross is the concern that the chicken has, right? The time, when to cross as well, too, right? So I'm getting particularly this actions line is telling me a little bit more about crossing the road. So, I get the question a lot. What's the difference between customer journey map, service blueprint, experience map? And that's kind of what I'm talking about here. My view of that is I think it's the point of view that's different. It's the story that you're ultimately telling. And from a service blueprint standpoint, we want to see, hey, we have the Road Crosser app. I want to see how that actually gets used and improve that service experience, right? Also, super valuable perspective to have, but it's a very different one than the customer journey map, right? The customer journey map is about the relationship to the brand and acquisition and loyalty and things like this. This is how do I get my front stage and my backstage to make that experience with my app as good as possible. I'm going to slide over to a third perspective here. Again, this is all the chickens crossing the road. It's the same scenario, but I have 3 different views on it. This is what we call in Jobs to be Done. We call this a job map. And what a job map does is it actually explicitly, and this is what I love about the jobs language and the jobs to be done technique, it explicitly expunges any reference to technology solutions or methods. So what you actually get is this kind of release of freedom from your own brand, from your own product, and you're not looking at the individual as a customer, and you're not looking at the individual as a user of your service. You're just trying to look at the individual as a goal-seeking actor in the world trying to reach some objective, right? So what Jobs to be Done does is it removes your solution. It's not about you at all. You add yourself later in the process, but this is your starting point in Jobs kind of process is you start here by understanding crossing the road. Now we're talking about how do you cross a road, right? And you'll notice here too, I even said cross a thoroughfare. So in Jobs language, you could say, well, is it a road? Is it a sidewalk? Maybe it's a ski path or a bike path or something else. So we're expunging any language that puts me into any one solution. We're removing the solution from the problem, right? So we're really just looking at the problem here. So the chicken decides to cross the road, determine which road to cross, select the point, determine when to cross, assess traffic, wait for absence of traffic, confirm absence of traffic, cross thoroughfare, observe changes while crossing, adjust speed if needed, and then you reach the other side. This is a story. It's a very thin story. I'll admit it's very thin because it's just telling you the steps, right? It's a thin story, but this is wholly about crossing the road. Now I've actually flipped my perspective because I've removed our brand or our solution, and I'm looking at crossing the road, in this case, completely from the chicken's perspective, right? Not from how does my app work, what GPS capabilities are there backstage, all that kind of thing. I'm also not looking at chicken through my brand. Are they going to recommend me? I'm just looking at crossing the road. And what Jobs to be Done says, just as a little tangent here, it says this should be your starting point for innovation and improvement. You should understand this. And then you can start layering on conversations. So step 1 is let's understand this. And then you can start saying, well, what functionalities do we have that help to do this, right? And in the service blueprint, actually, it's a pretty good app because it decides where to cross, when to cross, changes in speed. It actually gets a lot of these jobs done. So you can overlay a conversation about your specific solution here, but you could also overlay a conversation here about any other solution as well, too. The map isn't fundamentally about your product, brand, or solution, right? And that gives, I think that gives a lot of freedom, and that gives a lot of insights as well, too. Just one more perspective that I want to take. So I guess the point is, before I move on, I just want to say I often refer to this as kind of an out-of-body experience that you're using something like a job map. You're able to look back at your product and your solution, your company, from a 180 viewpoint. That you're not looking at it from, hey, I have a technology, how do I market and sell that? Or I have a technology, how does that get used? It's saying, what are people trying to get done? And then the second question is, okay, so therefore I need to have this service and I need to market it in this way. And it's this kind of, it removes yourself from the picture. You could actually have a project or a situation where you need all three views. But the point is, I just want us to recognize that there are different ways of mapping that fundamentally have different points of view. It's not just a technique. That a customer journey map and a service blueprint are violently different because they have different points of view. And a job map is yet another point of view. And they're all valid points of view that can help us understand the service situation, understand opportunities for innovation and improvement as well too. One more quick example here too, an experience map. So I use the term experience map in a very clear way. A lot of these terms, by the way, are used interchangeably, and I know it's a jungle out there from labels. So I'm giving you my definition of these labels: customer journey map, service blueprint, job map. And what I call an experience map is actually similar to a job map in that you're not talking about any specific technology. It's not the experience of using a given product. It's an experience of executing the job, but it has more layers of information on there. It's a little bit more free form and a little bit more descriptive, right? So I don't have a product here. So you notice the chicken persona doesn't have an app there, and there's not a product here. It's the experience of crossing the road. So it's kind of like a job map, but now I have, I've layered on emotions here. That guess what? Anxiety and uncertainty actually drive each other, right? Because I went out and observed and talked to a bunch of chickens, and I found out that uncertainty drives anxiety when they're crossing the road, right? So now we can start, when we're starting to talk about the solution, I have a little bit more of that emotional context and the needs in here. So the chicken believes that life would be better on the other side, right? That's not, I believe that this app will help me. This is a belief about that experience as well too. So actually I said I was going to talk about 3 different maps. This is actually 4 different types of maps. Sorry, 4 different types of maps. And the difference between them, yes, there's techniques and there's labels, but they're different viewpoints. What's your point of view? So I guess the point that I'm trying to make is that you need to ask yourself, what tool do I need? What point of view do I need to solve the problem that I have at hand? And there's different ways to do that.
So Jim, we have a bunch of questions already, but why don't you just answer this question? So if I'm a designer or if I'm a product manager, and so which one to choose? How do you know which tool to use? Because they're very similar. They have different zoom lenses.
Right. Different zoom lenses. I mean, I think it depends on the problem you're trying to solve and the audience that you're trying to talk to. Again, your audience is internal. None of these are external. None of these are for the chicken. The chicken doesn't need to see that. That's the consumer, the individual I'm trying to serve. These are all for teams internally, right? If you're working with a team of engineers, right, and you're trying to improve functionality, you're trying to improve service touch points, this might not be the best place to start, right? Because this is a broad story of the life relationship with the app almost, right? And this is great for high level kind of strategy. This is great for marketing and kind of brand design and that type of thing there too. If you're trying to improve functionality, touch points, if you're trying to iron out that service experience, right? You would want to talk about this, right? And now, particularly with front stage and backstage, now if I'm an engineer, I'm going, we have to display the user profile. I know all the, that's a ton of databases and authentication and all that stuff, right? So the engineer might find themselves better in here. But this also then addresses a certain problem, right?
So Jim, could there be a relationship between that? So could you start with an experience map, very high level, very simple, and you can dive into blueprint?
Absolutely. In fact, I often do that. One project that I worked on, I had a super high level customer journey map, but then I took each one of the phases and I broke it down, not into a service blueprint, but into a workflow diagram, a very, very detailed workflow diagram. They were like 5 or 6, what was it called in A2? A3, I forget the size, like an 8, I was in Germany at the time, 11 by 17, like 6 11 by 17 sheets. So very, very detailed for each one of those phases. So we said, okay, here's the big framework. Let's drill down in a different type of a map, right? And that's where we got into the nitty gritty. And that map actually took a little different, took a different perspective as well too. So I used the customer journey map as kind of the overall chronology on which I hung a couple of other different types of maps. And you very often see that as well too, that you'll have large boxes or chevrons at the top, and then you say, okay, I want to just look at this point in time, right?
So is there a different relationship? So this is clear, the journey map and the blueprint kind of work together. It's like an evolutionary step.
I think so.
What about the other ones? Is the job map an ancillary map to the service blueprint? Do you break it down? How do you?
I think so. You could actually start here. I think the difference there is what problem are you trying to solve, and what's your starting point for the effort. And very often on service design efforts, the assumption is already made. There's a service there that people are consuming, and you're not questioning fundamentally. What's that service or what's the brand. Is you want to iron out that experience and find opportunities for improvement and innovation within that service. This would be maybe a little bit higher level. It doesn't have to be. It could be fairly specific here. But I think this would be almost a strategic reflection, which is, okay, we have this app. Let's say it's been out there for 2 years. We want to expand. We want to get more market share. We want to extend the app. Where should we extend it? There's a couple different ways you can answer that question. One is you can do a bunch of marketing research and look at total addressable market and try to find more chickens. Maybe you just need to find more chickens. Another way to expand your market is to say, we need to get more of the job done, right? And then you could say, okay, how well do we help chickens determine which thoroughfare to cross? How well do we help the chicken select a point to cross, right? The other thing you can ask is, how important is that to the chicken as well too? Right? Because maybe actually selecting point isn't that important, but determining when to cross is super important. And guess what? If that's where we don't support it well, there's our opportunity for expansion. Let's beef up our GPS capabilities. Let's beef up our traffic analysis capability. Let's add a new function that blinks red when there's a car coming or whatever it is, right? So this I think you can zoom out a little bit more of this. In fact, an organization can zoom out even further and say, what business are we actually in? Or should we be in different businesses? And then you can start talking about related jobs. So in jobs to be done, this is a very simple job, right? Chicken crossing the road. But there might be other related jobs as well too, like go on an outing with my chicks for the day, or get food for the day or whatever. And they may interlock. In order to get the food, I have to cross the road. So if my bigger job is get food for the day, part of that might be crossing the road. And then there's all other jobs that the chicken's trying to get done. Right, chicken trying to get food for the day. So okay, so how can my service help them get food for the day, right? And expand the service as well too. So again, I think the fundamental question is, what problem are we trying to solve? And then the secondary question is, who's the audience of this? Who's the audience of the map, right? Yep. And I guess that's my point, is for us to think about the usability of our own tools and our own documents. And I see kind of like usability testing at the end of the 90s or 2000s. It was like everything had to have a usability test. Why? Because we do usability tests, right? Mm-hmm. And I feel a similar thing happening with customer journey maps. And I see that we're doing a customer journey map. Why? I don't know, because that's what everybody does. Right? Or the other way around, stakeholder. It's more on the stakeholder saying, I want a customer journey map for that, right? And they don't necessarily, because the word customer journey map is on everybody's lips, which was different when I wrote the book in 2016 and 2014, 15, when I was starting to research this. Not everybody knew what a customer journey map is. Good thing is everybody does now, but now they might be asking for a customer journey map, but they really need a service blueprint, right? So that's the problem we're in right now. or they want a customer journey map, but they don't want to do the work behind it. They don't want to do the verb. That's the bigger problem. They don't want to do the verb behind it.
So Jim, we're about 15 minutes left. There's a bunch of questions.
Okay.
If that's okay with you, we're gonna have some. You can probably just make some points there. Brendan, do you have a couple of questions you want to start with?
Absolutely. Are we going to keep sharing the screen, or are we going to?
Oh, it's up to you.
Yeah.
We'll leave them up just in case you want to utilize them.
Yeah, I can type on here or whatever too.
So you may have addressed this, but I think the way Lisa asked this is a little bit different than the way you were expressing it. So for me, Lisa Rasley, she said, what about the thought that customers may not be able to articulate all of their needs for jobs to be done? How can an empathetic view fit in to ensure customer motivations are uncovered in addition to known needs? So really easy question.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I agree with the fact that customers can't articulate their needs. I think they can articulate their needs independently of a solution. What they can't do is tell a solution maker what solution they want, right? But they can say, I want to minimize the chance I got struck by traffic. I want to reduce the chance of losing feathers. They will be able to say that. It takes a lot of research to uncover all of them. If you're trying to get all of them, then you're going to have to do a lot of research. But I believe it's possible to come up with a comprehensive model that covers most or all of the job and the job steps that chickens do when they cross the road. And you can uncover most or all of the needs as well, too. That there may be hidden needs in sense of they're not able to express their what the solution should do for them, but they should be able to express what they need, what they're trying to get done.
Awesome. We got another one from Fanny Carlson. How do these three maps for I'll read it exactly. How do these three maps for as-is maps versus what-if maps? So I think the question is like current state, future state.
Yeah, these are all kind of as-is views of the world. So this is based on research. I'm going out and observing and talking to chickens, and I'm creating a model of that experience, right? Because the word experience, or even service, is very hard to define, right? And the way that we get people into our conversations and facilitate conversations is to make a visual of that. So say, don't be afraid of the word experience. I have a structured way that we can talk about it, namely in the form of a map, right? So we use these diagrams in order to create a model. This is essentially a model, right? You observe the outside world, and then you create a model so that you can talk about what to do about it internally. And this is the hinge. This is the conversation point. And you know what? I forgot the question, Brendan.
No, it was about as is versus what if.
Oh, as is, right? Yeah. So I think it's
three different types.
Agree. Yeah. So the as is would come from research and observation, and then you create a model of that. And then the question is, so what? And I'm just going to zoom up here to the job map. Okay, so what? And like I said, you could overlay your service on here and see where do we actually support chickens in crossing the road, right? So that's the so what. And depending on the answer to the so what, it might be we believe that if we get more of the job done, or if we get these steps done better, that will improve our sales or whatever you're trying to improve, usage numbers, things like that. Then you would move into, okay, so what's the future state look like for us? Right. So I typically don't necessarily create a separate to be diagram. I very often underlay that. Right. So what I'll do is, job map or a service blueprint, and then the to-dos or the future state would be mapped to that. The problem is if you're actually changing the order of steps, right, then you might need to do that. The cool thing about a job map is that these steps probably aren't going to change regardless of the solution that you have. That these should be valid. You can ask yourself, actually, one of the test questions in Jobs to be Done is, what did they used to do 50 years ago? And by asking that, is this how chickens crossed the road 50 years ago? And yeah, it probably is. It's probably going to be future-proof as well, too. So you're probably not going to change the order of the steps with your solution. And if that's the case, then I typically find you can actually just put the future state right under the diagram that you created. If you are changing the order of the steps, right? So you're going from a taxi cab to Uber, right? Uber, that's one thing that Uber did really well, is they changed the order of everything, right? You pay before you get into the cab, right? Like the order of events changes violently from what you do with a taxi cab, right? And there I would say, okay, we need a to-be map, and then you might have to create a second map. But I typically find that you can actually just overlay the future state right onto your map.
Interesting. This is from our own Robin. I'm wondering if there's a structure of Jobs to be Done where you have more than two relationships, like B2B to C. I can see doing jobs to be done for each.
Yeah.
But is there a framework to reconcile how they relate?
Not that I know of. In jobs to be done. Jobs to be done is really about where do you start, right? It doesn't throw away service design, or it doesn't throw away aspirations or emotions or branding. It doesn't throw all those things away. Jobs to be done is really about a starting point. It says, where do you start? And it says, find that core fundamental job that people are trying to get done and make that your starting point. Now, in your question, though, there might be 2 or 3 that are related. So there's this notion of related jobs, right? That the job of the B2B person might be related to the B2C person. But in the jobs language, in terms of this, where do you start? There would be probably 2 or 3 different research efforts and 2 or 3 different maps that you could post next to each other and see relationships, but they would be self-contained. So what the first thing that you'd have to do is say, what's the job of the B2B provider? And what's that experience? And then what's the B2C experience as well too? And do those as separate but related efforts.
Excellent. Got a really interesting question from PH1 Research here. Any tips on how to work with internal salespeople? I mean, that could be the question itself, but it goes on.
I know. I was going to say, wait, really?
Yeah,
how much time? I got 5 minutes here.
Any tips on how to work with internal salespeople who do the work in an instinctual basis and race through steps? How do we get people like this to slow down and express what feels like second nature to them and potentially frustrating to talk about?
I have no friggin' idea. It's tough.
That's valid.
Yeah, it's definitely valid. And, depending on sales compensation models and things like that, they tend to be lone wolves. And, hey, we're going to have a company workshop or a team workshop. Okay, I'd rather be out selling because that's my salary right there. So sometimes it's hard. However, I have had a lot of great experiences looping in sales people into these conversations. So it goes back to my facilitation point as well too. And when I do mapping workshops, explicitly mapping workshops, I try to invite a range of stakeholders. So like I said, you get the marketing, branding person, you get the salesperson, you get the engineer. You just get them all in the room. So I think, and by the way, the other thing is like making an event out of it is also has a little bit more gravitas as well too. So, hey, we're bringing in the head of blah, blah, blah. You got to come too, right? Like make it like a VIP thing or an event that you have to come to. And a lot of here's the thing though about sales intuition. A lot of it's right. You know what I mean? And why don't we leverage that more in our field as well too? I've heard some things out of salespeople that are like, wow, that is really insightful, because they're actually out, on the ground, right, face to face with customers. It's a different perspective, and it's sometimes it's highly biased, right? Because all they see is a pen to sign the bottom line, right? When they see a person, they're not even looking at the person as a consumer; they're looking at the person as a check signer, right? Sometimes, but there can be a lot of insight that they bring to the table as well too.
Yeah. We're still getting some more questions. Let's look at this.
Can we go long, Jim? Are you okay with time?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah.
We've got a few minutes, right? So from Carmen Brion, or Brian, sorry, Carmen, if I butchered your name. Could you integrate the jobs map into the experience map? And if we did, would we still need the different lanes? No,
I don't think so. In fact, that's my elevator pitch on experience maps is to do the job maps and follow the rules of jobs to be done, which are you can't use any product solutions or technology. It has to begin with a verb. You can't use any ands or ors. I got a bunch of rules in my book. So start with that job map. In fact, if you look at this experience map, it's very much like the job map above. And then I put it down here, so decide what particular road to cross. I brought the word road back in here, though, because experience maps are a little bit more liberal in the language that you use. The rules aren't as strict. It's a little more free-form, right? But decide the road, check the traffic conditions, double check. I think above I said confirm or something like that. Sometimes jobs language is very artificial and rigid in the way that it works, and it flows a little bit more here. But these steps, these are almost exactly the same as above, except for the one celebrate here at the end. I would celebrate, right? So the spine of this experience map was that job map. And then I layered on these other things on top of here, right? So for me, that's why, for me, the way that I define an experience map isn't an experience with a product. It's an experience with an activity, with a goal that you're trying to get done, with the needs that you have as an individual, as a goal-seeking actor in the world. You're trying to get something done. There's an experience around that, with or without your stupid app. You know what I mean? And so when I use the word experience map, I mean this flip perspective, but then we layer on some other aspects here as well too. Like what's the aspiration here? The chicken believes that life would be better on the other side. They're trying to lower their anxiety just before they cross. That's a really anxious moment for chickens when they take that first step off the curb, right? Let's understand that and bring that into our dialogue as we're facilitating conversation. So I think for me, an experience map is that out of body flipping around, but then you layer on all these other things. Look, a moment of truth here. There's even a moment of truth right there as well too.
Yeah.
But you'll notice.
Question.
Yeah. Wait, one point. You notice there's no technology in here. There's not a word about an app or anything. There's no technology in here at all.
A quick question about your decision to go from the happy smiley face and the sad smiley face that is pretty common to anxiety certainty.
Yeah,
I can see why you're doing this, but the smiley face is just so easy, approachable. Anybody understand? Okay, this is a sad moment, it's a happy moment, right?
I guess so.
Certainty is a bit different because you can be certainly scared and you can be certainly happy, right? So how do you work that?
I don't know. I have a lot of bones to pick with the way that we indicate emotions in maps. First of all, sometimes I've seen examples of diagrams and the label on the row over here, it just says emotion. And then there's a line that goes up and down. It's like, well, which emotion, right? That kind of thing. Happy face, smiley face, a little bit better, but I don't find it's precise enough. And there's not enough. It's basically just, there's no hypothesis that comes out of that. You're just saying whether they're happy or sad. Anxiety and certainty, the assumption that's here, I actually didn't do research to do this project. I didn't talk to chickens. No chickens were harmed in the making of this map here, right? But what I'm trying to show here is that there's a hypothesis here. And the hypothesis is the emotion of anxiety is driven by uncertainty, right? Which then, as a service provider, says, how can I reduce the uncertainty that the chicken has in order to drive its anxiety? Just having smiley faces doesn't show you that pattern. And you can even see here, they're inversely proportional to each other, right? And my other assumption here is that came out of the research, that as the researcher, I saw that, and I want to represent that in my story. So I think it's a little more precise, Greg, is basically what I'm saying.
Good. Could those two words change, like anxiety and certainty? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, this came out of my research with chickens that I actually didn't do, but that's basically what I'm saying, is that is the pattern that I saw, that the two key elements that drive each other are uncertainty and, in this case, anxiety. It might be a different emotion for a different, for a different experience that people are trying to do. Right?
Cool. Brendan, you have more questions?
I think we might have time for one more. Let me see if I can find it. I want to ask it just right. It's also from Fanny as well. Again, so sorry to double up, but she asked, can you give examples of how you work with quantifying hypotheses in the jobs map?
Quantifying hypotheses in the job map. There's a couple ways. There's a couple ways that you can use this, and I don't have an example right here, but I have an example of an exercise that I did here at Mural, where we created a job map for a job that's very relevant to us, and then we actually just used that to have a conversation, and the quantification actually came from the team itself. So this is very much shooting from the hip, trying to estimate as best we could where and how well we support each one of these. And the exercise I gave was just give a school grade. Everybody give a school grade on each one of these steps. So I had about 4 people in a workshop, right? And then what you end up with is a series of, sticky notes or whatever you're using that say, we get an A here, or maybe not there, but maybe over here. Like the road crosser does really good at selecting the point, right? We get A's and B's here. So you're actually grading your own performance from your own perspective. That again, very much shooting from the hip. I'm not suggesting that's scientific. I'm just saying that this can be a really good conversation starter just by having everybody give a school grade to each one of the steps on how well do you support the chicken at that step, right? The other way to do it is actually to create a survey. And what I could do is I could take these labels here, decide to cross, determine which thoroughfare to cross, and actually I can actually put that in a survey, and I can give that to 300 chickens and ask them 2 questions. How important is that step to you? And how satisfied are you getting that step done with any means available to you right now? And then what you can actually do is plot your opportunity. And what you're looking for are things that are important to the chicken, but are currently unsatisfied in their lives, right? And what that does is that then pinpoints actually observing changes in traffic right now. Super important for chickens. They told me on a survey quantitatively, but they say right now it's hard for them to get that job done. Not with my app, but with anything means done, with any means possible, right? So that points to a strategic opportunity to me as a service provider that I can beat the competition by getting that job done better than anybody else, right? So it is possible to take this data and then quantify it in like a survey with actual customers, people, right? As well too. I tend to not do that too much. I've done some of that. Now you get into complications of survey, sample size, sampling in general. It becomes very, very complicated, and then you get data back that you go, that wasn't conclusive. And I don't know why it wasn't conclusive, because it could have been my methodology, it could have been the wording, it could have been the sample that I had. And very often I come back with things that aren't as conclusive as I'd like it to be. But then you stand up and you say, I did the scientific study. So as a researcher, there's a little bit of a confidence problem there as well too. It can be done, and it's helpful to at least have that data point. What I typically do is say, again, it's about me and my team, and we have to make decisions. Right here at the Road Crosser, we have to decide where we want to play and where we want to be better. Right, so let's just foster that conversation directly here.
Cool. I think we're 5 minutes over, but we did start a little bit late. I think a bunch of people are anxious. Could we get a peek of the other map, the 5th map that you haven't shown yet, that's on your board?
Oh, sure. Yeah, this is a thing called the expressive service blueprint. Anybody heard of that before? I have an example in the book. It's in one of the last chapters. This was Susan Spragan and a couple of other people came up with this term because, it's essentially that same service blueprint that I had up at top, which has no emotions or aspirations in it, right? And that was the realization of service blueprinting very often leaves that out. At least the classic service blueprint format leaves that out. So they said, hey, what if we overlay emotions on the service blueprint, right?
Okay.
So now I have anxiety inserted. What's that?
Are you sharing that or?
Oh, sorry. I stopped sharing my screen.
Yeah.
Boom. There you go. So it's literally exactly that same map, but instead of the, physical evidence, which I never really, I don't know what that means. So, feelings and thoughts and questions here as well too. So I added a little bit more experiential, emotional aspect on top of the service blueprint called an expressive service blueprint.
And I think that's what Jim was saying at the beginning, is that there is no 2 maps are similar, right? Depends on the customers. Right. I've done this, just because I had to, right? You can actually have multiple ones. And then the question becomes, right, when is it too much, right? Because you can actually have you can have like different emotions, and you have different touch points, you have different times. I mean,
agree.
So how many swim lanes can you have? It's really up to you, right?
Well, it's also up to your audience. Again, what's the usability of your own technique? Because if this is supposed to be a platform for conversations, right? This is a catalyst for a dialogue. You have to be very, very judicious. And if you've ever done research, right? If you've talked to 12 chickens or 12 customers, an hour-long interview is 30 pages of text, right? And you have all that in your mind, and you just want to tell all those stories, but you have to boil it down to a reduction sauce that gets to the point, the exact point that you want to tell, the story that you heard that is relevant to your stakeholders in a way that they can see it on one piece of paper. That's really hard to do, but that's the job. And then you have to be judicious about what information goes in there so that you're not missing any of the important things, but you're not overloading people with detail as well too.
So Jim, have you seen an evolution? So you wrote this book about mapping experiences 4 or 5 years ago now. Yeah. And obviously a bunch of people like me, Brandon and Robin, have been making new maps, right? Literally have probably a different map every time they're on a job. Sure. So is the new book going to be, what have you seen the past 4 years? Is mapping experiences becoming like insane, simpler, better?
It's become insane, and I think there's if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, kind of thing. We got to map that, and I see some teams mapping themselves into a frenzy, Like, oh, we got to map that. And it's like, well, maybe you don't actually just have the conversation. Maybe it's an email, right? Do you have to map it, or can you just send an email? Like, ask yourself that question first, that kind of thing. But then you do have map proliferation, just like you have persona proliferation. How many of your organizations have more than 24 personas floating around the organization? I know I worked for a company. We did a survey. We had 200 personas around the whole organization. It was a big company, right? But it's like, you get, hey, we need a persona, and there's personas like littering the office floor. Same thing with journey maps now. They're just littering everything. Do we need all those? Probably not. Is it a good exercise? Yeah, I think it's a great employee experience. I think it's great to have had that touch point, at least at that moment in time with that team, to have that common conversation around this. Is it too much? Probably. It's probably too much, because ultimately this is just a tool. This is just a means to the end. The end is, what improvements or innovations do I need to make to my service and product, right? And this is just kind of a stepping stone, and it's probably not needed in all cases. I would actually advocate for less mapping in the world, to be honest with you.
Yeah, but we also saw, I don't know if you saw the Mark Stickdorn. He has like a very journey map organization, right? He has like maps embedded into other maps, and there's like a relationship of maps.
Yeah.
Which is incredible when you think about how powerful that is.
It
so
is,
where do you stand on that?
I've never done it. I've talked to several people in different companies, one at IBM actually, that were doing this kind of hierarchy, like breaking down IBM's business, which is gigantic, into domains, and then breaking down the domains into maps so that you can almost literally click through. Actually, they're creating a database so you could click through from map to map to map and get more granular and that kind of thing. I've also had some other companies kind of structure that type of thing. I've never worked in a place myself where we had that. So the utility of it is something that I'm not personally familiar with.
Do you have one last recommendation for designers? So remember, we have students who are just starting the service design and the mapping, and then we have some people who have been doing this for 10 years. So do you have any last recommendation, trend, something to look forward to, or like, don't do this,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's around some of the things that I've said already. So summary is, the map is a means to an end, and your first goal is to foster a conversation to make a decision, right? So you need to be thinking about that conversation as much as anything else. Obviously, valid research and that kind of thing, but how do you tell a story visually that will allow you to have that conversation to get to the decision that the team needs, right? In a direct way. But I think the other point here, I guess, of my whole presentation is use the right tool at the right time. Right? What's your point of view? What problem are you trying to solve? And are you using the right tool to do that? And I guess the third thing that we just talked about is, do you even need to map at all? or is it a conversation or an email? Yeah.
Cool. Brandon, Robin, do you have one last question or?
One that's popped up several times. Jim, is there a public consumable version of your mural board you've been sharing?
This one? No, not yet, actually. Let me think. Maybe I can export this as a PDF. I don't know if I want everybody in here, but I can export it, and if you just send it around to the people who attended, that would be fine.
Or you can screenshot it, I guess.
No, I can just PDF it. So I'll take a minute and a PDF, and I'll send it over to you guys.
So
it'll be the whole thing.
A safe version if you want to scrub it or anything like that. Maybe we can attach it to our YouTube link or. Okay.
Yeah, the Alchemy company may not be really happy with you if you actually just distribute their
Right, exactly. Well, to be honest with you, that's one reason why I used the example, is because I was trying to think of an example that universal and not branded and blah blah blah. And why not? Chickens crossing the road. It also kind of takes the seriousness out of things, because sometimes we get really serious about jobs to be done. We're going to save the world and do a corporate strategy based on jobs to be done. It's like, nah, just help the chicken cross the road, and you're good.
But Jim, you make a good point. Like, now this is very simple and it's obviously, digestible, but I mean, Robin and I worked on some really, really complicated stuff where a journal map becomes, 30 feet long in a war room, right? So do you have any recommendation for stuff that's like, I know, like,
yeah. I mean, and probably too, correct me if I'm wrong, Greg, but you probably had a trouble just sorting out the which stakeholder, whose experience are we mapping and which experiences are we mapping? Because in B2B situations, you have half a dozen or a dozen different stakeholders that have a half a dozen or a dozen different experiences that intertwine, right? here's a chicken using an app. It's pretty easy. Whose experience, which experience, right? So this is all nice and self-contained, and I know exactly what I'm doing. But very often, particularly on the B2B side, the world is a lot complexer. And I think the thing is, what's your point of view, right? Which story do you want to tell? Whose experience are you mapping, and which experience are you mapping? You need to sort those out at first. Otherwise, it's going to be a train wreck down the halfway down your wall, right? And I also think, to my point about not over mapping as well too, is can you simplify it and actually do what I'm doing here? Like, can you take a big complex space and make it as simple as looking at chicken across the road? Because part of mapping is to try to simplify the complexity of the outside world. Experiences, service experience are violently complex. Our business stakeholders have the attention span of a fly sometimes. And how are we able to tell that complex story in a very, very simple way? So simplify.
Jim, to that point, one of my talking points that I probably end up saying, and every time I'm on stage or giving a talk, is the opposite of complexity isn't simplicity; it's clarity.
Clarity, I agree.
Some things are inherently complex.
I agree.
Simplified. So
I agree.
I love your example because you're taking a complex process and bringing clarity to the individual elements, but it's still complicated.
Right. Agree. Right. And I always say too, like I said, if you did an hour-long interview, that's 30 pages of text. Your journey map's not going to reflect 30 pages of text. So you necessarily have to pull out the bits that you want. And I always say clarity over comprehensiveness. So you don't want to tell the whole story. You want to tell a clear story, just the reduction sauce of that story. Clarity is a word that I use quite a bit as well too, Brandon.
So, Jim, thank you so much for being with us today. It was great. This was very informative. So thank you for sharing that resources with us. We'll kind of get those links to people. We'd love to have you again. I mean, I'm sure would love to have you for your second version of the book. Okay. Maybe just to be done, But there's definitely mapping experience is a big part of what we do. At least a big visible part of what we do. A lot of the people kind of equate service design with blueprinting, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. But so let's see if we can have you again. So maybe it's this summer.
Well, where to find me.
When is your next book coming out?
The next
book? It's official.
Now it's official. I don't know, actually. All I had was end of the year or beginning of the next year. So it's going to take about another 6 months to review, edit, compile, and then get it to the market. So maybe
2021.
Maybe it'll be in a stocking stuffer for Christmas. I don't know.
Maybe we can have you here as an early kind of like a sneak peek, maybe.
Okay, there you go.
Sounds good.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Hey, you just committed, so you have to stick with it.
Yeah, I'm happy to come back. Actually, yeah, I'm sure my publisher will love the promotion too. Right around the launch.
All right, no problem. We would love to have you. I mean, as I said, if you don't have this book, you're missing on really important stuff. Cool. So thank you so much for everybody to be here today. Let me just close up really quickly. Reminder, on the 9th, which is next week, we'll have Mark Fontaine at Holland going to talk to us about education and portfolios. And then we'll have Christine and Garcia talking about success stories and secret sauce of service design. And then we'll have Andy on the 25th and then Jesse on the 30th. So a very busy month of June. Again, thank you so much, Jim. It was a blast to have you over and to finally be able to pick your brain and not just read the pages of the book covered with Post-its and a bunch of stuff on it. Thank you so much, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good one.